Welcome to 24 Hours of Past, 20 years of past learnings and future vision. We're excited you could join us today for Rick Heiges' session, Constant Change and Community. This 24 Hours of Past consists of 24 consecutive live webinars delivered by expert speakers from the past community. These sessions will be recorded and posted online after the event. You will receive an email letting you know when these are available. My name is Tracy Baggiano, and I will be your moderator. I have a few introductory slides before I hand over the reins to Rick. If you require technical assistance, please type your request into the question pane located on the right side of your screen, and someone will assist you. This question pane is also where you may ask any questions throughout the presentation. Feel free to enter your questions at any time, and once we get to the Q&A portion of the session, I will read your questions out loud to the speaker. You are able to zoom in on the presentation content by using the zoom button located on the top of the presentation window. Please note that there will be a short evaluation at the end of the session, which will pop up after the webinar ends in your web browser. Your feedback is really important to us for future events, so please take a moment to complete this. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Microsoft and Intel. The staging of 24 Hours of Past wouldn't be possible without their generous support, and they're the reason this event is available free of charge. If you would like to learn more about Microsoft or Intel and sign up for information on how they can help you, please visit the sponsors page of the 24 Hours of Past website. Keep learning all year long with PASS. Visit PASS.org and check out all of their free educational resources available to PASS members. Also, don't forget that PASS Summit 2019 will be happening on November 5th in Seattle, Washington. Head over to passsummit.com and register today. This 24 Hours of Past session is presented by Rick Heiges. Rick is a former data platform MVP and senior consultant for Microsoft, where he focuses on working with customers on their data estate. Rick also served 9 years on the PASS Board of Directors and spearheaded this popular 24 Hours of Past event. His career includes work as a DBA, university full-time faculty member, system analyst, project leader, and developer. He has found his passion in working with data in the community. And without further ado, here's Rick with Constant Change and Community.
Great. Thank you so much, Tracy. By the way, it was great to see you this weekend at Richmond, the SQL Saturday event that was held this past weekend. Always great to reconnect with other people in the community. And, that is part of what this session is all about. We're going to, talk about constant change, but also the constant of community throughout this all. So what we're going to do is we're going to pretend we're Doc Brown, and we're going to go on a journey through time. We're going to start off 20 years ago when PASS first formed, and we're going to understand the foundations that were there, what the issues of the day were. Then we're going to go forward 5 years to 15 years ago, talk about the game-changing stuff that was happening at that time, and how we support each other through all that. 10 years ago, more innovation. Clouds were started to be on the horizon, started to be part of our culture and our discussions about what the future holds. And then 5 years ago, we started talking about 100x scale, hackathon, and clouds were definitely part of our picture at that time. Big data was definitely a hot topic at the time. And we started to think about how we could take advantage of everything that was available to us. And then, of course, today, talking about making the cloud work for you and a little bit about machine learning and AI. And then we're going to break out our crystal ball, and we're going to look into the future and see, what we can see, coming at us and how we can deal with that. So in order to try to make sense of this journey, I have a framework for it. So we're going to actually have some what I call pop culture observations. And I'm not going to talk about what movie was popular or what the favorite song was, but I'm going to talk about everyday tech that you're familiar with, and what the state of the art at that time was for most of us. Also, the hot topics of the day, what we wanted to know at that time period. what the pain points were for us. And I think as we go through here, you're going to say, oh, wow, I don't have to think about that anymore because it's already been taken care of. We're also going to talk about trends, data composition, volume, et cetera, and also about the community, about not just past, but we're definitely going to focus a lot on past, on this quadrant, if you will, of our discussion, but also other stuff was happening in the community, the educational offerings, the audience, how that has changed over the years and where it's heading. So we get in our DeLorean and we go back 20 years, back to around 1999, and we're all partying like it's 1999, aren't we? Yes, of course we are. And to put it in perspective, the number one cell phone in 1999 was the Nokia 3210. And I don't even remember what this thing looks like, but when I did my research on what the popular phone was, it was this Nokia. And the big thing about it was that you could actually, it was one of the first cell phones that did not have an external extendable antenna. So it was just a handset, and you didn't have an external antenna to worry about. So that was the big thing, if you will, at the time. Now, also, the first BlackBerry came out in 1999. If you don't know what a BlackBerry is, don't worry. It's a two-way pager. It basically is, you could have a little keyboard on there and you could type messages easily back and forth. Now remember, all the other cell phones at this time just had the digital keypad. So if it wasn't a keyboard really on your phone, just the keys. And I remember if you wanted to send a text message with your phone and you needed to get to a letter that wasn't at the beginning of that number, you had hit the number 3 times or whatever to get to that position on the keypad. It was a big pain in the butt. But anyway, and your monitor that you used at work probably weighed about 20 pounds. It was a big old CRT type device, and you need 2 people to help move that off the desk to move it safely. 3.5-inch floppies were pretty much gone, or just barely hanging on. CDs were in. Matter of fact, whenever you had your MSDN subscription, you'd get the CDs sent to you, and so you could then put them in a little folder. So that's the way primarily that software was distributed at that time, was via CDs. And USB was just starting out. So just this whole promise of USB was coming out. So that's kind of give you from a everyday technology, if you will, where we're at that time. Hot topics, because of 1999, the year 2000 bug, right? Hey, things are going to blow up at midnight on New Year's Eve, right before January 1st, 2000. And, we're all going to have computer systems die down. And it really turned out not to be such a big deal, but I think a lot of it had to do with all the focus we put on that in the years leading up to it. Backup and restore was a popular topic back then. Why? Well, because remember, at this time, most of us did backups to magnetic tape at the time. Not a lot of people at that time did not have discs to back up to, so we backed up to tape. And every time we did that, we also said a little prayer saying, please don't be corrupted if I need you to be restored. So, and then we started thinking about HA and DR around this time, about, hey, if I have another system in case this one dies, how can I stay up and not lose business? The other thing that we dealt with at this time was talking about disk configuration in terms of RAID. So usually you had, when you had your server, you had multiple disks in your server case, or maybe you had an external disk enclosure that was physically attached to your server. And you could configure these disks in a certain way for performance and safety, et cetera. So there were discussions about what was the best option, using RAID 0 or RAID 1 or RAID 5 or RAID 10. So and use RAID 0 for temp DB and RAID 1 for your log file, RAID 5 for your data. So it was a big discussion about all that, and also what size of the disk, because often the size of the disk would also be a trade-off for capacity. So if you need more capacity, you may have to sacrifice some speed on your spinning media in order to get more capacity. Or if you want more speed, you have to give up capacity. So it was kind of a either-or type of thing. And of course, indexing was also another topic that was of great interest at the time. Understanding what the best way of implementing indexes were, especially with SQL Server. So let's move down to trends. Internet traffic. So at the time, it averaged about 28 petabytes of internet traffic per month. And all of our SQL servers at the time were 32-bit. And the most memory you could really have with that type of system is 4 gigs of memory. Later on, we could extend that out a little bit. We could do some memory tricks in order to get things more. But at this time, if you had 4 gigs of RAM, you were, the cat's meow, if you will. And a large database was probably around 20 gigabytes. That was a pretty large database back then. And in the community, the summit attendance for that very first pass was less than 1,000 people. I was not there at the very first summit, so I can't tell you firsthand. But however, from the history that we have and the people I've talked to who were there, we're talking less than 1,000 people there. But it was a great success. In the audience at the time, a lot of DBAs, a lot of developers, and just a little smidgen of BI people at the time. Because again, think about SQL Server at the time. SQL Server 7, yes, it did have OLAP services, but it really was not a big player in the BI space at the time. And the PASS website, it was basically a brochure for the conference. As a matter of fact, we didn't even have online registration. We had some SIGs, which were special interest groups. And actually, I'm not even clear on how they actually communicated or did things. And we had some limited forums, but we didn't get a lot of traffic in there as well. So the website at the time for PASS was very, very limited. So we get back in our DeLorean and we move up to 5 more years, and now we're at 2004. So I have a misprint here. It's not the same Nokia phone as number 1, but it is another Nokia cell phone. And the big thing with this one is you had exchangeable color plates to put on the face of your phone in order to be stylish. So, but it was still pretty much a phone. Blackberries were starting to really become popular. And, I remember, you saw somebody with a BlackBerry, oh man, they're really cool. They must be important because they have to have a BlackBerry to be in constant communication with everybody. So that was, one of the status symbols at the time, if you will. Wi-Fi was starting to take off big. USB was catching on big. So we have all types of USB devices. At the time, I remember I got a new laptop, and it had Wi-Fi already built in. I didn't need another USB device to put into my laptop in order to connect to the internet. So that was great. And another thing that happened in 2004, and some people might say, what are you talking about? Why is Salesforce.com IPO? Why is that such a big thing? Well, here's the thing, is that Salesforce, as you probably know, is a software as a service offering. And so when it went IPO, not only did it prove that, yes, software as a service could be a technical success, but it could also be a successful business model. And that got people thinking, hey, if I can sell the software as a service, I can keep money flowing in instead of just selling a license for the software. I can start thinking about, the subscription model type of thing. So yes, it wasn't really big from from our community point of view, but it was big on what things were to come in the future. Hot topics in 2004. We talked a lot about SQL Server 2005 because it was going to come out the next year. And actually, they were hoping it was going to come out 2004, but it didn't because of something else with I think it was the NIMDA virus in 2004 that really had Microsoft sit up and take notice of taking care of security. Because if you remember, up until that point, you can install SQL Server with no password for the SA account. So anybody could go into that database and do whatever they wanted to that data. Also at this time, because SQL Server 2005 was not going to come out until the following year, in 2004, they had the SQL Server Reporting Services add-on, if you will, a featured pack download for SQL Server 2000. And to fix that SA no password problem, they released a service pack, SP3 and SP3A, because SP3 didn't solve everybody's problem. So again, that was a big thing for Microsoft to realize that they needed to take security seriously. And what they basically did is they stopped development on SQL Server and sent their developers to be trained on how to develop software more securely. And yes, it delayed the release of SQL Server 2005, but it paid off in the long term because SQL Server has been the least vulnerable database platform since the release of 2005. So yes, it was a painful lesson to learn, but they learned it and they learned it well. And of course, another hot topic at the time is, of course, how to get more performance out of your box, especially when we're still pretty much confined to 32 bits for your SQL Server 2000 box. Unless you had an Itanium box, there wasn't an Itanium version of SQL Server 2000 available at that time, but very few people had that. The internet traffic grew to 1,477 petabytes per month. Remember, 5 years earlier, it was only at 28 petabytes. So explosive growth of data on the internet. There was a religious war basically started up about the Itanium architecture, the IA64 architecture versus the X64 architecture. Which one was better? And there was it's kind of like I think of Betamax and VHS. Probably Betamax had better technology, but VHS was more popular, and eventually VHS won out. Same thing here with IA64. IA64 was a true 64-bit architecture. X64 was 32-bit with some extensions to make it work compatible with the old architecture, and it won out eventually. Now, because at the time in 2004 we still had SQL Server 2000, basically we still were constrained by 32-bit technology. So we could have more than 4 gigs of RAM in our server. We just couldn't really access it unless we did some memory tricks, and they weren't very helpful, to be quite honest. Also at this time, our storage, instead of being confined to the server, a lot of the storage for our databases started to move outside the server and onto SANs. And this is both a good and bad thing, right? It's one of the good things is that SANs usually have more redundancy built into them. So in other words, the disks themselves were safer, but also from a DBA point of view, you had another person to interface with about managing your environment. The SAN administrator, you had to deal with that person now. Yes, we're getting some more safety, but also we have another person to deal with as well. In the community, Summit attendance was growing very well, and our audience was still primarily DBAs and developers, and a little bit more BI now. We started to really, cross into not just managing the data and building code around it, but also how we can make sense of that data with BI. The PASS website was improving, but it still had a long way to go. It wasn't really much more still than a brochure for the the summit. So we that was one of those things where we needed to make a big change, and we knew we had to because we just couldn't survive just having a brochure as our website. The other thing that happened around this time was SQL Server Central, which I'm sure many of you are members of and probably still get their daily email every day. I know I do. I still get it in my inbox every day. I don't read it as often as I used to, but it really helped have another channel to help build a sense of community out there among all of us who were using SQL Server at the time. There'd be questions, they had forums, people would start to get to know each other somewhat on SQL Server Central. So that was another part of the community that was big 15 years ago. All right, so we go forward again 5 years to 10 years ago, and we're at 2009. So again, let's take a look at the popular phone. Now, the Apple iPhone 3GS was the big seller in 2009. Now, the iPhone was just released in 2007, so 2 years later, it was really being the gorilla, if you will, in the phone space. But more than often than that, this is the other thing to think about. When the iPhone was released, it really became a mobile computing platform. And so that, people were thinking, before this, your data was on your local device at home or in the office, and you connected to it that way to get your data. Now, with the iPhone, you had basically a connection to your data, which could be in the cloud, didn't have to be at home, and you could go anywhere and still access that data. So this was one of those changes that you see as being another move forward to what the future is going to be. Now, the BlackBerry was still cool at the time. I remember actually the year before, in 2008, when President Obama was campaigning, he had a BlackBerry, and he was like, oh wow, he's cool, he's hip, because he's in constant communication with everybody and the staff. So that was, I remember the BlackBerry was still cool in 2009. Now, it was not as cool as it used to be, but it was still a status symbol. Now, at your workspace, you probably had a flat screen monitor. It probably was not high definition, but it was at least not 20 pounds. You can move it easier, and you felt a little bit more modern, if you will. And also at this time, SSDs were generally available for a lot of laptops. Not that that was the norm, but it was generally available, so you could get that option put in. The hot topics of the day. One of my favorite keynotes ever at PASS was Dr. DeWitt in 2009. He gave a keynote about what actually we call column store today. He talked about how storage really was lagging behind the progress compared to compute and memory. And basically, a column store is going to help us move forward to get more throughput on our storage devices. And so that was one of my favorite things. NoSQL was starting to become a topic at the time. It really was not considered a real, what I call, threat, if you will, to SQL Server or just SQL in general, because, well, they don't know what they're talking about. They have eventual consistency, whatever the heck that is. It's like, eventual consistency, how can you live that way? Because as a relational database guy that I was like, what are you talking about? How can that make sense? So, but it was still something that was coming as a topic that was on the rise. Business analytics started to gain more traction because it was like, okay, we have all this data, and we need to, make it more presentable, start visualizing it more, and get more value out of that data. So that's where the business analytics piece started to come on the rise there. And also, this is something else that I found out in my research, and I don't remember this, to tell you the truth, but in 2009, Azure SQL Database launched. So happy birthday, Azure SQL Database. You've grown in the last 10 years, by the way. It's amazing what they can do now. At the time, when they launched it, a lot of people snickered. and said it's not a, it's a little toy database, and doesn't, the throughput on it isn't very good, etc. And one of the things that really bugged people, and still bugs me a little bit today, is that with Azure SQL Database, there is no backup command. And as a DBA, you're going, wait a minute, that's the first thing I need to do as a DBA. I need to back up that data. But it's done for you in the background. We're not going to get into that discussion, but that's just one of the things that was going on at the time was this new paradigm of there's a database as a service, a platform as a service offering with SQL with the basis of SQL Server. And so that was something totally new at that time. The trends, the internet traffic was up again, yes, about 10 times to almost 15 petabytes per month. And the x64 architecture was now the prevailing winner, basically. That meant you had a lot of RAM. IA64 architecture is pretty much dead at this time. It never really took off greatly. It was edge case stuff primarily. And hardware vendors at the time started to talk about offering appliances. And that meant like a cabinet of storage and compute that would just be for databases. And so they started talking about a database consolidation appliance. And also the early talk about what eventually became PDW, Parallel Data Warehouse. So that was kind of about 10 years ago when that kind of trend was popping up. And in reality, it didn't take off for SQL Server very well. It did for some other data platforms, but not really for SQL Server. And in the community, some attendance was strong at 4,000 attendees plus. The audience still DBA, Dev, BI was a much bigger part of it now, but it's DBA and Dev were still more the lion's share than anything. The PASS website really came of age between 2004 and 2009. We changed management companies, and they got people who knew what they were doing with a website, and started to offer streaming content, virtual user groups, local user group signups. When you signed up for PASS, like say, by the way, we have a local user group in the area. Would you like to register with that group as well? And so there was lots of, more offerings, if you will, at the PASS website. And also, 10 years ago, we had the very first 24 hours of PASS. So happy birthday, 24 hours of PASS, woohoo! And I know some of you out there stayed up for the entire 24-hour period that first time and saw all 24 sessions. I think there are about 10 of you, if I remember correctly. And SQL Saturdays are also gaining popularity in 2009. They had some successful events in just a couple years earlier, and they started to replicate that, and people were starting to really do more and more of these SQL Saturday events down the road here. Okay, so again, we moved 5 years forward in our DeLorean, and the pop culture piece. The Apple iPhone 6 and 6 Plus are at the top of the heap. Android phones are becoming very popular as well and eating into that market share of the iPhone. The BlackBerry is now dead. They tried to revive it about a year or two ago, but it's dead, essentially. Flat screens that were high definition were now available. You also usually had multiple monitors at your workstation so you could move stuff around, become more productive. SSDs were now very common in laptops. So we started to really get to a different space than we were in the 5 years before. Hot topics, in-memory LTP, Hackathon. I remember seeing the demo whenever we changed to memory optimized tables and natively compiled stored procedures, and we got 25, 30x increase in performance just by switching our paradigm to in-memory LTP. So that was a really cool thing at the time. Always On had been introduced in 2012, and there's another iteration of it in 2014, so it continues to become mature. And also in 2014, the column store index, you can have a cluster column store index on your tables that was updatable. So that was something new at the time as well in 2014. Also, there's another shift, if you will, in the analytics space, because we had done lots of work on having the ability to see all the what has happened with our data, and we're starting to get more into predictive analytics, saying, well, can you tell me what is going to happen from all the data that you have? Can you start telling me what I can expect to happen? Starting to get into predictive analytics, and that is kind of a precursor to machine learning and artificial intelligence and things of that nature. So we started to see some offshoots into that space in 2014. Big data is now definitely on the radar, part of our conversation. Now, some of us still don't know what it is at the time, but it is definitely, we say, yeah, we're going to talk about big data. And that was definitely a hot topic at the time, which also led to another discussion about, well, how do we make use of that data? Do we do our traditional ETL process, extract, transform, and load process, or do we do an extract, load, and transform process? Which one's better? And of course, the answer is, it depends, as usual, because I'm a consultant. So that's my answer to just about everything. It depends. But we started having more discussions around, what is better for the situation. And public cloud in 2014 definitely becoming more and more accepted, part of the normal discussion about where am I going to go in the future? Where's my next server going to be? Is it going to be on-prem, or is it going to be in the cloud? Started to have more discussions around that area in 2014. The trends that we had at the time also for internet traffic was now up to about 60 petabytes per month, up from about 15, so 4x growth over that time period. Multi-core processors, yes, we had multi-core processors in years before. However, now we're starting to get crazy numbers like 18-core chips and things of that nature, and lots of RAM we can stuff in right beside those chips to make our workloads go fast. And SSDs popularity are very much growing at this time, especially like things like Fusion IO cards locally in your server. SANs are starting to deploy SSDs in their cabinets as well to help with any latency concerns that you may have. So those are some of the industry trends that we have. And then the community, some attendance is about 5,000 people. The audience, I should say, is now more even. In years past, it has been still DBAs, developers, and that's still a very strong core of the audience here in our community. But we also have added BI analytics people as well. And the past website was more integrated, started having a common profile, and especially from a speaker point of view, I could use my SQL Saturday profile for my speaker, for my summit abstract submissions as well. So things became more integrated. Also, between 2009 and 2014, SQL Saturday was then folded into PASS, and really what happened was PASS was able to start provide some more infrastructure and some more services to make basically throwing a SQL Saturday event much easier. Standardized processes, best practices, tools, registration tools, marketing kits, all this stuff really made SQL Saturdays take off. So it's amazing, how PASS has transformed over all these years. All right, so Doc Brown just got back from the past, and we're here today. And pop culture, I'm sure I don't have to tell you this very much because you're here today with me. So we have very powerful phones, Apple, Samsung, LG, etc. It's amazing how much compute power that we have in the palm of our hands. We can stream content everywhere. I can watch movies on my phone. I can watch sports on my phone. I can watch it just about anywhere. We have unlimited data plans now that are reasonable. Wi-Fi is very common. Matter of fact, it's very uncommon when I go somewhere like out to eat and they don't have Wi-Fi. That's kind of uncommon. We have larger displays at home and at work, and multiple displays again. We have faster SSDs, faster USBs, and something else that's starting to take hold right now is the 5G cellular connections, which are going to be much faster than the 4G ones. That may change basically how we interact on our mobile devices with the internet, just because we no longer have to be concerned about the amount of data because we're getting it so fast, we don't have that constraint anymore. The hot topics today, moving to the cloud, big data clusters. That's one of the hallmarks of SQL Server 2019 is big data clusters and data virtualization. What the heck does that mean? Well, that means that SQL Server can interface easily with other data platforms like Oracle, Teradata, etc. And instead of just reaching out to those other data platforms and ingesting all that data into SQL Server, because that would take time, we're going to say, it's going to interface with those other data platforms and say, hey, here's the information I need. Can you get that for me and bring it back to me? And it can combine it with the data that it has inside SQL Server as well, and then can present you the results. So that is, I think, going to be a game changer going forward. DevOps is a big topic these days. Open source solutions, IoT, Internet of Things, and also things like security, privacy, compliance. These are bigger and bigger topics that we hear about when we talk to other data professionals. So it's one of those things that we need to keep our eye on because it is such I think, a big part of how we're going to interface with other people, other organizations in the future. The trends were actually over 150 petabytes per month, up from 60 petabytes from 5 years before. Scale out processing, especially in the cloud, so we can, if we have a workload in the cloud, we can spin up a bunch of nodes and get our work done. And then as we get less busy, we can turn them off, and shrink our footprint down. So we're only paying for what we're really using. So we're not as wasteful as we used to be. Hybrid cloud architectures. So there might be stuff that we need to have on-prem, but we want to take advantage of the stuff in the cloud. So definitely, we're having those discussions today with customers. And in the community, the summit attendance is still strong. And our audience is opening up beyond what our traditional audience has been. Yes, DBAs, devs, BI people are still the lion's share of that. However, we're starting to open it up to more multi-cloud type of discussions. Open source, so not just SQL Server, but what if I want to run MySQL on Postgres? We're starting to have more of those discussions, or Cosmos DB and other things. Yes, we're still have a lot of Microsoft focus on the topics that we discussed in the past, but definitely it is changing as time goes on. Now, the other thing that happens at the summit these days is what I call curated content. And yes, the past program committee for years has done a great job at getting content that was relevant to the community and getting speakers that could deliver that well. But now they've taken a kind of a different approach where they're also incorporating more and more industry research to really drive what they want to see at the summit and basically help you understand what is a fad and what is going to be around for a long time. So, it's one of those things where they're doing some research for you to help get you the content that you need to understand for the future. So is it a fad or is it the future? And also a new offering from PASS has occurred just in the past few years called the PASS Marathons. And these are what I kind of think of them as mini 24 hours of PASS events. So instead of having 24 hours, they might have 4, 6, 8-hour marathons on a particular subject. So it is another innovation to helping to serve the community. So with that, we need to now, Doc Brown is going to take the DeLorean into the future. I'm going to get my crystal ball open here. And this is kind of what I see currently as some trends that you might want to think about going into the future. Phones, these are incredible devices. I really see them incorporating more and more AI because think of it, they have incredible cameras now on these devices. They have microphones that are sensitive. They have crystal clear displays that can present you all types of great information. So I see, that really leveraging the power of AI in the cloud to be brought into your hand. That's where I kind of see things moving from that point of view. And the platform that can deliver that has a big advantage. Also, wearable computing. Now, I myself today, I have a Garmin device on my wrist here for my workouts. Also wear it at night so I can see how well I slept, if I rested well or whatever. And think about all the data that's generated. And think about all the data your phone generates. We have to have some way of understanding what data is important and what is not. That's where IoT devices come in for data collection, and of course, using machine learning to understand what data is important going forward. But also, everything I see in the future is implants. Now, you could really get forward thinking and say, I'm going to get a chip implanted in my hand, so I don't have to break up my phone to pay. I can just swipe my hand over the device and pay for things. Maybe that might happen. I think it's going to be hard pressed to get people to understand about putting a little chip in your hand. But also think about in the health space. What I mean by implants is, maybe if you lost a limb or were in an accident or had, got paralyzed or whatever, there might be some other devices that you can, might be implanted into you to help you cope with daily life. So that's kind of where I see that stuff going. Topics I see in the future, I still see security, privacy, encryption as being top of mind in the future. Compliance, of course. AI and machine learning. How do we, understand all this data? How do we make it work for us? But also, more importantly, I think, is AI ethics, right? Because, with the power of these machines and what we can, create the models and have them understand what the world is around us, there can always be bias in that. And you can have AI for good, but you can also have AI for bad. So really, you need to think about structuring a framework around how we leverage artificial intelligence in the future. Again, this is my kind of take on what I see as a topic in the future. Some trends. The internet traffic, it's going to continue for explosive growth. I don't have a number, but it's going to be big. And also big compute. And what I mean by that is having lots of computers available to you at a moment's notice so that you can process all this data quickly and easily. The community, and especially PASS, will continue to facilitate your ability to connect to each other in the community, to help you share your knowledge among each other and learn from one another. Like PASS's tagline for many, many years has been connect, share, learn. That is the constant, and amongst all this change, is that we are going to have a community here to help support you and manage your change as the world changes. You have to embrace change. If you don't embrace change, you're not going to be really, in a good spot in the future. You're not going to remain relevant unless you embrace change. So let's sum it up. The past, we've had some tough challenges in the past, and a lot of those challenges have been eliminated. A good example here is, back 20 years ago, I had to think about, I had a new server. I had to figure out what RAID configuration for my drives, and and things of that nature. Now I don't even think about it. I just go, I need storage that has this much capacity and this much throughput, and I'm pretty much done. I don't have to worry about all those decisions that I used to fret about way back when. Or we have processes in place that help make things easier to understand. We have flows, data flows in place to help us control the environment much better. So we've had the technology and processes really help us solve the problems of what I call yesteryear. Today, I don't think there's any more exciting place than to be in the data world today. We have data virtualization going on. We talked about that for a minute. Big data, all the ways of ingesting that data and making sense of that data. Hybrid computing, data science, AI, machine learning. The list goes on and on and on. It's the possibilities are limitless in what we can do, and that is available today. So, what will the future bring? I don't know. The challenges and the technology will change. New realities will emerge. Cool new trends today may make it, or it may fade out. So, and one thing that, I've learned over the years from being part of this community is that, I can always rely on other people in the community to help guide me, to help me keep up with the change, and help encourage me to embrace change. So my call to action for you is to get involved. If you're not already involved with a local user group, get involved. If you haven't been to a SQL Saturday, go to one. They're free, basically, right? $10 for lunch, usually, and sometimes not even that. Go to the past summit. Attend a virtual user group. Attend a past marathon. You're here at 24 hours to pass. That's a great start. Let's keep it going. Come to the summit. It's a great time. I used to call it summer camp for DBAs, but now it's more of a celebration of being a data professional and really embracing the future. So that's really what I want you to think about, is getting more and more involved with the community, because I've learned so much from the community. I know that if people say this is an old cliche, but you get out of it what you put in, and so definitely get involved. So with that, we're going to take some questions, and I don't know how many questions we had, but also I want to invite you to, if you have a vision of the future and you would like to share a little bit of commentary on that, put that in the question box so that we can benefit from it as well. Start contributing now. So with that, Tracy, do we have any questions or comments?
Not as of yet. We shall see.
Okay, we'll just hang on here a minute or two and talk about the I say I embrace change, and I definitely have embraced change over the last day or so. I was talking with Tracy before the event started, and we both embraced change of changing from snow yesterday to 70-degree weather today here in North Carolina. So we definitely embrace change here in the community. So,
yes, we did. We got a comment that you did a good. Yet? Someone made a comment that you did a good summary of the history.
Very good. All right. Well, if we don't have any more comments coming in, I think we should probably start to wrap it up and then give people a few minutes extra to get to the next session, which is about what?
All right, coming up next, we're going to stay tuned for our next session on how to get and nail your interviews with Parish. Thank you all for attending.
Very good.
And
there's my contact information as well.
Oh, yeah.
So
please contact
go ahead.
Rick.
Sorry.
That's all right. Please contact Rick if you got any more questions. And this was the 24 hours of pass. And that is it. We're ready to go to the next session. And stay on and answer the survey at the end, please.
Thank you, everybody, for attending.